Mick Corrigan here from Action Coach, and delighted to say I've got James Ascroft with me today. James is the co-founder of Sairo and Overview, with potentially others to follow. Who knows? Let's watch this space. So welcome, James. Tell us a bit about your business then. What's it all about?
Yeah, thank you very much, Nick. So Sairo is an innovation incubator. We've been going for, I think it'll be coming up 5 years in October. We started out of COVID. We're all young. We're all 27. Getting mixed up there, just turned 27. So we graduated basically into COVID from university from a variety of degrees. We then saw an opportunity in the market to basically tackle how we could bring businesses to what ended up being considered the metaverse. It wasn't necessarily called that at the time. It was just simply the case that we saw an opportunity to use gaming technology for any form of business. From an honest point of view, the past 4 and a bit years have been very difficult. We rode certain waves as much as we could. We obviously weren't in a position to take advantage of the COVID situation from a financial point of view. However, we did find enormous benefit from COVID and simply learning how to do business. So Sairo, in its 4th year now, has morphed into, as I said, an innovation incubator. What that means is that we have focused Sairo to be a workshop company. So our typical clientele are education, typically youth-orientated companies. We work quite heavily with Blackburn Youth Zone. Equally so, we've done a lot of work with digital fashion, been working with the likes of Machino, Coach, etc., which has been a strong focus on using immersive technology like augmented reality and virtual reality, as well as metaverse platforms. From a workshop's point of view, we have enormous focus now on Roblox. I think as any parent, or I guess you could say any relation to any kid, from the ages of 5 upwards, they'll know that they play Roblox. Ultimately, Roblox is very much the early days of the metaverse. Metaverse meaning effectively the next version of the internet, and how people experience businesses online. It will instead be spatial, and Roblox is effectively the early indicator, the mass early indicator, that the future generations will work spatially and operate spatially, whether that's with e-commerce, to learning, to just simply, being in virtual environments and, building connections through that.
Wow,
so I'm giving you a lot there at once.
This is fascinating stuff. Tell me about what do you mean by spatially?
So by spatially, I mean, if you think of any video games that you've probably seen advertised, or whether yourself, friends, anybody who plays games, you'll know that they are typically digital environments. They look like films, but you can run around them and you're in control of the character or the entity that is running around them. Basically that. So that's what I mean by spatial. Yeah.
Right. So illustrative.
Yes, illustrative. It can be realistic. It can look like real life, or it can look stylized. You'll know, if you know Roblox, what they can typically look like.
Tell me about Roblox. I've not come across Roblox.
So Roblox, as I was sort of saying, is very much seen as the metaverse of the future, or as what the term metaverse is. The reason why is because it ultimately has the highest player base. So Roblox has roughly 90 million concurrent daily active users. It recently just posted in 2024, I believe, 3.2 billion in revenue for creators. It is effectively a game that allows players of that to jump around different environments and play loads of different experiences. Think of it in the same sense as if you go on Facebook and you scroll through your stories or your videos. It's like you flip through one video to another video. Think of that, but applied to virtual environment. So you can jump into different spaces and play a game, go on to a different one, so on and so on.
This is fascinating. So this is using this type of environment, this gaming environment, and applying it to a business context, is it?
Yeah, so in the case of one of the large projects we're on with at the moment, we're working with a lovely lady called Helen, who has basically got Innovate UK funding to build a eco-education platform. She herself is building the physical version of it, where it's a pop-up space where she can take it to schools, museums, etc., and put on an actual physical experience for kids to learn about eco-education. We are mirroring that digitally through Roblox. So we're in the process of creating a game that allows kids to basically learn about eco-education through gameplay. So it's as simple as they are dropped into an environment that's not dissimilar to your everyday British park. And in that park, they go on a mission to basically help 3 species that are at risk. So you've got hedgehogs, the buff-tailed bumblebee, and the pipistrelle bat. And those characters they can interact with, they can talk to them, and those characters, those species, tell them what they're in need of. In the case of the bats, they have issues with lighting, so there's a gameplay mechanic that allows the kids to understand how they can fix persistent 24-hour lighting to allow the bats to actually experience a better night cycle. In the case of the hedgehogs, it's like removing certain fences and creating hedgehog highways. So,
Wow.
you know, again, it all makes sense. If you had a teacher stood in front of them and explain this to them, sure, it's great. But instead, with this, they can actually go and have like a miniature replicated version of that where they can pick up resources and then build the actual hedgehog highway and put it in place. And the idea is that once they do that digitally, they are then capable of, then going and doing it physically. So that's
And
one way of how you can use
get,
Roblox.
yeah, and I guess that's like 10x learning, at least.
Yes, 100%. There's plenty of studies that show that simply using gamification as a learning technique can increase just overall susceptibility to what's actually going on. It is ultimately the future way of doing things. It's how we already learn ourselves. We learn by moving around. We learn by using our
Mm.
hands and doing things. And ultimately, there's an element of parallel nature to that when you're doing something spatially, digitally.
Yeah. James, how unique or niche is this?
It's still very niche. So, for example, we've struggled for the past 4 or 5 years because we've found that typically potential clientele need to get educated about what actually is bloody going on, to then go and start to think about, oh, I could actually use it like this, and then it's a potential sale conversion. It's not as simple as just being a website design company, an agency, and we can do your website for you. And if you tried doing that 20 years ago, it was the exact same position as now. People go, why do I need a website? What am I going to get out of it? We don't have that 20 years. We've got started now, and we've got to try and find a way of basically maintaining the business and try and find new angles. Ultimately, that's why we've started Overview, and that's why we're working on a new business model for Roblox in another angle. And then just to sort of go back from that, that's also why we're doing the workshops, because we can see that our knowledge at this point is really valuable. And from a business model point of view, it makes sense to offer out workshop sessions for companies just to let them dip their toe in something and maybe start to think about how they can use not just Roblox, but gaming experiences, immersive experiences to their benefit for either themselves and their teams or
Mm.
externally to their potential audience or audiences that already exist.
So up to now, it's been more education, children and youth oriented, but
That is now the new
the business
direction.
application is definitely an opportunity.
Yeah, that is the new direction. Ultimately,
Yeah.
we tried our best to make, as I sort of said, we worked with those big fashion brands. Ultimately, it's very difficult to show the ROI on that because typically the users of this stuff are typically kids, teenagers, young adults. It's more about the eyes on for the experience and showing that you are being innovative that gives the value. Ultimately, as the website, www.com stuff, back in the day, people didn't really use it. They didn't have the devices to you go on the web. We are riding that wave as the devices come in, as computers become more powerful, what we do will become more relevant. And we want to be a leader, not just in the UK, but in Europe and America. And if we could, China, but you never know, who knows? We ultimately see those as our areas. So, yeah.
This is absolutely fascinating. You're really getting my mind going here in terms of what this holds for the world.
Yeah, I mean, the AI thing at the moment is the big one that's riding. That's the big wave. And we actually have a machine learning specialist in the team. Um, I think ultimately AI is doing this big thing where it's going like this. I think you're going to see that the metaverse, web, internet is going to come back. Ultimately, the hype curve, which you quote unquote, AI is the big thing at the moment. You won't hear as much about all this metaverse stuff because it's already peaked and come back down, but it's in that stage where it's gradually going up now. I think as well as we're talking, locally here. There's not really anybody else doing this stuff around here. There are some very large companies based in the UK that have been going for 20, 25 years that already had a very strong hold around kid experiences and what they can create and for children. What they've found is that, oh my God, there's some of this massive opportunity where we can use this same tech to basically cater towards those kids that are now getting older. They're turning into, young adults, and those young adults are expecting things to continue. We're jumping into that now. So, there's company Dubbit in Leeds is a very notable one. There's ones over in the States, like Soho Studios. They're the big companies that are activating people like Vans, Adidas, Nike. Typical movies like Despicable Me, Star Wars, etc. They're the companies that are doing the very big brand activations in Roblox, and we're trying to go after those small to medium-sized businesses here. But ultimately, typically those businesses don't have as much money to put into educating the team and then doing the experience. Hence why we're niching into just doing the education for now.
Sure. So what are the challenges ahead?
Survive. I think, to be completely honest, the economy in the UK is bloody difficult. We have conversations with agencies like Dubbit, and they acknowledge that they barely get any work in the UK. Ultimately, innovation is going on a lot more in the stronger economies such as the Middle East, America, and South Korea, China. Ultimately, for us, our future steps are basically to try and go international more. That is more of the focus of Stack, quote unquote, the converter, this other company that we're building that's still yet to have a proper name. Sairo is going to very much remain at its roots around here and work on, delivering workshops to local companies, nationwide companies. Yeah.
Cool. So you've been in business like 4 to 5 years, maybe 4 and a bit years.
Four and a bit
What have
years.
you learned along the way on that journey, James?
That you as ultimately, as much as you can have good ideas, you really need to understand what the numbers look like. I think for us, we approached it from a very much like creative point of view, going, this is really cool tech. We can make really cool stuff. People will come because they think that's really cool. They won't. You've got to show ROI. You've got to really show that people are actually interested in this stuff. Ultimately, that's why we are now focusing on Roblox, because like I can say to you, I can say 90 million daily active users. Stuff like that's really important. And, a lot of that comes from naivety. I think we wouldn't have got started if we were aware of this stuff. So there's an argument to be made that it's just good that we got started. However, we are very much now 4 years down the line, very focused on numbers, and delivering real value to clients.
Good learning, good learning. And if you had your time all over again, what might you do differently?
I think that we would probably focus on building a product first and foremost, so that we ultimately had IP and value in the company. Ultimately, as a service-based business, it's difficult to sell those typical types of businesses. Ultimately, we've had to take 4 years to find the right connections and learn the right things to be in a position where we are now building products. Ultimately, Stack Converter is a reflection of that. It is ultimately an automation of what we have been doing using machine learning, so that we own machine learning processes, we own product, so that is now an entity, an IP that we can go and sell.
James, absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thanks very much for sharing where you're at and where you're going, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Mick.